It won't surprise you that competitive advantage is pretty fundamental to growth. So, scenario. I've got a competitive product. Sorry, I've got a commodity product. Lots of them the same out there. How do I create a difference? I'm confronted with lots and lots of consumers. Why me? And in fact, one of the questions that we ask when we're looking at entrepreneurs who want to raise venture capital or angel finance is once we've gone through the product and the problem and the customer and so on, we then say, okay, now why you? If you can't tell us why you can do a better job than everyone else, if you can't tell us why they come to you and they want you to solve the problem, then you don't have a competitive advantage. And if you don't have a competitive advantage, you don't have the fundamentals for growth. So we need to go back to, what is the fundamental about competitive advantage? Now, competitive advantage is an advantage or a set of favourable circumstances around one or more dimensions of customer value. Now, that definition is actually quite important because customer value itself is made up of many characteristics. So someone who's got a commodity product can create a competitive advantage through an element of fun, through an element of branding, through an element of position. If we take the airlines, for example, they all buy the same planes, they all have the same seats, they all have the same dreadful food. How does one airline create a difference? Well, a lot of them do it through branding. Some of them do it through their loyalty schemes. Some of them do it through their lounges. Some of them do it through their pricing. But they're all looking for these little elements to build up a package of customer value components. So we can look at our products or service and we can say to our customers, what creates value for you? Is it ease of use? Is it availability? Is it the way we interact with you? Is it our knowledge of your business? Is it the fact that our systems integrate with your systems? Is it the fact that our prices are better? Not a good place to have a competitive advantage because it's easy to match price. You need to find competitive advantage around other elements other than price because price is too easy to copy. So we look always for where we connect to the customer and what the customer values, and then can we add dimensions around that. Draw a matrix of everything that the customer thinks is important and put all your competitors along the top of the matrix and fill in where they have strong positions and where they have weak positions, and then put yourself in there as well. And what you'll find is you have some elements where you have strengths and you have some elements where you have weaknesses. But what's fascinating is you'll find some empty boxes. I've always been fascinated by this, that actually you get a bunch of competitors and they all compete in a little area. And they leave all these other elements of how customers perceive value blank. And what that means is there's lots of dimensions where you can create additional value. And we tend to focus on what I call product utility, the specifications of the product itself. Okay, and you might be able to find some characteristic on where you've got a better specification, but that's only one part of the way customers perceive value. They might perceive greater value in empathy. I'm talking to a salesman who understands my business, that's spent 15 years in the industry, they know my language, they know what I need, they can quickly understand my requirements, they can anticipate my requirements, and I'd much rather buy from them than buy a near equivalent product or even a better product from someone else, because actually I need to find a way of introducing it into my organisation, and I need someone to come in that my people will relate to. Who would have thought of that as a way of creating customer value? Or I might want customer value in that when I order it, I want it tomorrow. And maybe that's the dimension that I can compete on if I've not got too much going for me somewhere else. So drawing this matrix and developing that is really important. Think about, again, the buyer experience. What questions does the buyer have to go through in order to get to the point where they buy and use? And can I do more about reducing that cycle? Fast growth companies, almost without an exception, have high referral sales. So there's something going on about the way in which their customers are using their products and are referring them to someone else. They're talking about their products. Or the company's going to them and developing case studies and developing testimonials in order for them to reduce the evaluation time of a new prospect. So think about that as well. Okay, so let's get into the questions. Okay, if we're talking about competitive advantage, then what have you got that customers relate to well? What has the shortest sales cycle? What has the highest premium? Where do you find customers coming to you and telling you you've got the best product? Do you even ask them? Great question. So what are they telling you? What are your competitors telling you about your product? The fascinating thing, I used to have these coffees with my competitors when we would go to exhibitions. And you know, I mean, they're very careful about what they would say, but they'd often talk about sites that they're doing really well, and they'd often talk about sites that they should have never got into. And you start to reflect, well, why didn't that work for you but it worked for us? Why does this one work for them but it doesn't work for... So there's something going on here that we should be emphasising. There's some part of the customer value proposition that we've got an edge on. Are we exploiting it enough? Right? So these are the sort of things that you can talk at. I always ask my entrepreneurs, what are you really good at? And it's quite amazing, they often don't know. And I want to get, you know, what are you really good at and what are you really bad at? Okay, well, we need to do some stuff around, something around what we're really bad at. But the stuff that we're really good at, how are we exploiting that to create additional competitive advantage in the marketplace? And are we using what we're good at to find the right customer who actually values that bit of what we're good at more than our competitors? So again, it's this process of search. Actions. Guess what? Do I say this often? Talk to the customer. Okay. We used to have an annual customer conference. Doesn't work for everybody, but in this industry, software industry, we used to have an annual customer conference where we'd bring in key speakers from our organisation to talk about particular problems that our customers were solving and easier ways to solve the solutions. We talk about the innovations in the product that were coming, but we'd also ask our customers who'd had some interesting experience to come and talk about those experiences. And then we would have breakout sessions in different areas of functionality where we'd ask customers to brainstorm around issues that they were concerned about, problems that they were still having, and things that they would look for in the product. So we were actually driving a lot of our innovation through that customer feedback, but what we were doing, we were constantly creating additional value. Now, I can tell you from personal experience that when a customer has a complaint, the one thing you absolutely have to do is acknowledge it. Now, the strange thing is that in acknowledging the problem, you take away 80% of the heat. And then if you can show that you're doing something about the problem, you can pretty much get rid of the rest. The funny thing is, you don't necessarily always have to fix the problem. That's the funny thing about the way in which customers perceive value. They perceive value because you're interested in them. You're empathising with them. You're acknowledging them, and we're working on doing something about it. Now, if we go back to them and say, really sorry, can't do anything for a year, but here's all the stuff that we've done to try to figure out, you know, where the problem is and what happened and how we can work the workaround. But seriously, you know, it's a major change. It's a year away. You know, often they'll just say, okay, that's, you know, we accept that. But it's the interaction that was really important. And so, again, that's an action that you should always have inside your organisation to acknowledge, collect, work on, respond, because it actually creates customer value in its own right. The strange thing about expectations, there is a theory, management theory, that says, you know, always exceed the customer's expectations. Bad move. Really bad move. The funny thing about customers is they like consistency and they like stability. They want to know what they're getting, and they want to know, it'll be on time, it'll be to budget, etc., etc. The last thing they actually want is for you to deliver something to them that they weren't expecting or didn't want. Because if you're into a regular cycle of repeat selling, the last thing you want to do is change the bar. If every time you deliver 5 and one time you deliver 7 and then you go back and you do what you're supposed to do is deliver 5, now they're pissed off because they didn't get their 7. Bad news. So much, much better to be able to clearly understand what you're doing, set the right expectations, and have all the systems and processes that deliver that to the customer. Now, that's not to say that you can't reward customers in different ways, but make sure that when you reward the customers, it doesn't interfere with the way in which you've set the expectations for product service delivery. It's quite interesting. And particularly if you've got different products at different price points, that's the worst thing you can possibly do, is to upset that. We talked about the matrix, talked about the strength, and we're also talking about acquiring products or services in that will give you this additional advantage. So these are worth working on, because when you put competitive advantage alongside compelling need, you actually have to have both. You can't be solving a compelling need which dramatically reduces the sales cycle and then not have the competitive advantage that means you capture the market. You actually have to have both.